I get to talk about Beyonce. So
we're systemically cis, het, white, male run. And if you don't fit into that, you have to make a pathway for your career.
It made me sit through 3 hours. So yeah, I'm gonna complain about Blonde here.
One of the main flaws about the Super Mario Bros. Movie is the absence of female characters, like the absence of women.
The first hangover, there's like a phone call scene at the beginning, and that's like the only female presence in that entire movie.
Like the day she turns 50, oh, she's a scary hag. Oh, she has no life. Like, oh, she's in a forest. Like,
hey everyone, welcome to our next Incluvie Roundtable. This is March, so of course we're doing Women's History Month, and we're super excited to get into some great films and topics. We're going to go around with introductions of the Incluvie movie critics here. I'll start. I'm Kathy.
I'm Melissa.
I'm Andrew.
I'm Bonnie.
I'm Josh.
I'm MG.
I'm Atreo.
Okay, everyone, have a good time.
Welcome, everyone, to our newest Incluvie Roundtable. As mentioned, we're focusing on Women's History Month. So there's a lot to talk about because that's a very big topic. But I wanted to start with more of the positives because I feel like we could go on about the negatives for the entire month. But I think we should go into the positives and then maybe get into the deep, dark stuff. So I thought that maybe if we went around and started talking about our favorite directors right now, our favorite women-centric movies, all of that good stuff. MG?
Right now, I would say, like, as a writer, I love writer directors. And I think that there's something about like writing the story and realizing it that's just like, it always makes it that much more impactful and like authentic to what's going on. And I got to start out with Greta Gerwig because I think that I could talk about Ladybird, I could talk about Little Women, I could talk about this upcoming Barbie movie that, like, I've never been a fan of Barbie, huge surprise, I know. But when I saw that it was Greta Gerwig and also Margot Robbie, because Margot Robbie has also taken on sort of like the creative side of producing things, I just feel like it's completely in the right hands and I can't wait to see it. But yeah, Greta Gerwig, 100%, one of my favorites right now.
Bonnie, you want to go?
My favorite movie that I recently wrote about is Ivy and Bean, and it's based on the children's book series of the same name. Ivy and Bean is about two girls with opposite personalities. Ivy is a very quiet and shy girl, wears dresses and headbands, and wears pink. And Bean is the opposite. She is a tomboy who wears jeans and overalls. Bean is the main focus because the fans they liked her personality because it shows that girls can do anything boys can do, and she does not get along with her older sister Nancy, who is very opposite of her. She is into magazines, shopping, and wanting to get her ears pierced, and there'll be a lot of further discussion as I go into the Ivy and Bean film series.
Great. Andrew?
Okay, so I have a couple just because I feel like they do different things. So of course I always love Ava Duvernay. I've always liked her work on a more serious note as far as like her documentaries and just the way she kind of tackles those kind of things. I'm in love with Issa Rae because I love the awkward Black girl, like, and her rap shit. Like, she did rap shit, but I feel like the funny thing is there's still some awkward Black girl in rap shit too. Like, I love that she started off like talking about the nerdy Black girl who's never represented and just blew up from there. And then like Insecure is just so cool just because it's literally different types of Black women, right? Like diversity within Black women, natural hair, but like different mindsets, different like ways people are acting. And then of course I love Viola Davis's foray into like storytelling and directing, and I've been in love with her forever for acting, and I love seeing her like make a foray into actual directing too. So those would be like some people that I'm really watching. I'm not the most versed with directors at all in general, but those are people I'm watching right now.
Awesome. MG, got something to add?
I do, because I love Issa Rae as well. And I also want to talk about, when we're talking about Issa Rae, I feel like in this day and age, there's all these different avenues into creating your own success. And I think Issa Rae is a really great example of like someone who took like a web series and made it into what her career is now. Like all of this started with Misadventures of the Awkward Black Girl. Like, that was a web series on YouTube. If you look up the episodes on YouTube, like, it looks like it's something that's very like indie filmmaking. Like, she just kind of put it together on her own. It's hilarious, by the way. Like, it totally holds up and it's exactly her brand of humor. You can see why it blew up after that. But I think it's so cool to watch her like star rise if you look from the beginning of like where she started. And it really encourages people to go out and just like make stuff. You know, if you're not seeing your particular part of your representation and your identity that you're needing to see on screen, go get a camera and make it, and you might be like manifest this career and get this like contract with like HBO and have your own show. Like it can happen. So I just want to comment on that because yeah, Issa Rae, fantastic, but outside of like just all the quality of what she does, her journey and her story is so inspiring. Yeah.
Yeah, she's amazing. Josh?
Yeah, I'd like to bring up the two women who recently won Best Director Oscars. That's Jane Campion and a few years ago, Kathryn Bigelow. Jane Campion, I've been a big fan of since The Piano. I really love The Piano, and I really enjoyed sort of her comeback last year directing Power of the Dog, which I thought was a really good movie with a very powerful ending. Kathryn Bigelow, who I've also been following basically since Point Break. She's put out a really interesting resume of films, most recently when she won for The Hurt Locker, which was a great film. She has a way of shooting men interacting with one another that's very sort of like intimate and interesting and ambiguous. Kathryn Bigelow hasn't put out a movie since Detroit, which was a great film that kind of got overlooked during the Oscar season. And Jane Campion, I'm just hoping she's continuing on this sort of comeback trail of hers. I'm not sure what she has coming up, but I'm definitely looking forward to, you know, what she has in store next.
Yeah, I love those two, especially because I feel like they kind of put themselves in like male dominated genres. Like war and westerns are like the most manly genre you could ever get into, but they like put it in a different light. And I find it actually a lot like lighter and more emotional sometimes. Bonnie?
So when Josh mentioned about female directors, the Ivy and Bean film series, they're all directed by Alyssa Down, who is a female director. In fact, the Ivy and Bean film series is not only just a representative film series featuring strong women, but it's also belongs in the children's genre. And looking very closely at the live cast, you can see that many of the cast members are in fact women of color. For example, Bean's family. The main characters are Bean, her older sister Nancy, and Bean's mother, along with Ivy and Ivy's mother, which are all female characters. Bean's family can be easily distinguished because they're African American descent. Bean's hair represents like the traditional African American hairstyle. If you look very closely at like the children's book series and like the film series, you can see there's a big difference because Bean's family, representing African Americans, brings a really strong personality and diversity among women of color. Whereas Ivy representing white, it's just like two people of color can represent cohesively. And Bean's sister Nancy, like she is a combination of Ivy and Bean, which she has a girly personality, but she is also African American in color. And from the film series, we can see how Ivy and Bean are constantly like, you know, misunderstood because like they're just children, like, they have imaginations which end up into trouble.
Yeah, that sounds like a great like contrast and great for children to see. Atreo, did you want to add anything?
So anyone who knows me is gonna see this coming, but Elizabeth Banks is among the best people that I'm following right now. What you were saying about Issa Rae, MG, like her evolution. I remember her character from Modern Family. That's the first time I saw her actually. But after watching Charlie's Angels and of course Cocaine Bear, guys, if you can stomach gore, just go and watch it. I promise you it'll be worth the watch. Every monster flick you see the same tropes. She hasn't much diverged from that. And what I like about the statement she's making there is that I can make the same movie as a woman. I don't have to make it different. And how that hasn't really hampered her progress. Because do you see how the critics are taking it? Everyone's in love with the film. So yeah, I'm telling you, it's gonna be up there with Barbie, you guys. Also Greta Gerwig, of course, number one, Greta Gerwig, obviously. And one of my favorite genres is stand-up, so there's a lot of new creatives to look out for. I mean, Ali Wong is not new, I know, and I'm a huge fan of her. Same for Taylor Tomlinson, huge fan. And body of work is coming out, people. Hannah Gatsby is gonna be coming back. Yeah, so keep an eye out.
We love a Cocaine Bear promo. Andrew?
So I was sitting here thinking about it, and I was like, I forgot about Quinta Brunson. Just watching her, especially when she was more of a supporting kind of comic relief kind of character in some of the shows I watched, like a Black Lady sketch show and some other things she's been in. Just watching Abbott Elementary just blossom and just like how awesome the humor is. Sometimes I get annoyed with the idea that if like a show has a Black lead, it's like a black show now, right? Because we don't do that with other shows. Like we don't say like this show was a white show, like, right? Because just because there are white leads or something. So
some shows are white shows though.
we know they are. We know they are. Yeah, we know they are. MG, good point. I like that Quinta said, I'm just making funny comedy with Black people, with us in the center, with our comedy there for everyone to enjoy. I'm not curtailing to anyone else, but I'm also not excluding anyone else. Anyone's welcome to come and laugh because these should land universally. But if you don't like it, she's like, okay, whatever, right? But the show is hilarious. Like, I love seeing the connections where like some people are even connecting it to The Office, and I didn't watch The Office, so forgive me, but just talking about Tyler.
That's an example of a white show. Sorry to
Right.
cut in, but yeah.
Right. And so talking about like Tyler and the way he looks at the camera being very similar to, I think his name is Jim, I'm not sure. But the point is, I just thought that was hilarious just watching Abbott Elementary and just seeing how cool it is. I love seeing people rise. Like, it's really fun to see someone like Quinta or Issa, like you were saying, MG, start where they started. And they used to be in this little pocket where like only this niche audience knew them. And then you're just watching them on stage now, like almost in tears because they're literally like, you know, I'm here, I'm having my big moment, I'm getting an Oscar, you know, I'm finally being recognized. And it doesn't mean their work before that wasn't worthy. It just means I'm happy to see people get their flowers, like while they're still active, if that makes sense. So I just want to add that.
MG?
First of all, Andrew, you didn't forget about Quinta. We can talk about everybody that we want to talk about. Like there's so many people to talk, which is a great thing. It's great that there are so many female creatives that are getting to show what they can do. And I think a lot of that is about starting out the way that they can, creating the way that they can, getting themselves out there, and then getting the luck and the opportunity to get to do something. And then what do they do with that? And I feel like both Issa and Quinta, I mean, Quinta's still very much at the beginning of that. I also have been following Quinta for like years, like back when she was doing those like BuzzFeed, like YouTube videos. I still remember one of the first times I saw one of those, and I immediately was like, this person's brand of comedy and like their way of looking at the world is very similar to the way that I do. I want to see this person do more things. And then I remember when they announced that she was getting her own show, I was like, she's getting her own show? This is amazing. And then they said what the show was. And as someone who went to public school, I was like, I'm going to love this show. I'm going to relate so much to what is going on this show, in addition to the fact that it's Quinta and it's going to be great comedy. It's wonderful to me that the like community has embraced it too, because sometimes, you know, people kind of pick and choose what they want to watch, particularly with network TV. So I love it that people are like really embracing this show and really lauding it in the way that it should be. We're kind of at a time where I think people are more open to watching more diverse things, and not because it is a Black show, more because it is on network TV and it is a sitcom. And there are so many sitcoms out there that it is hard to kind of like find your way into that space. So I think it's very impressive that has happened. I'm not surprised, because Quinta is brilliant and she's compiled an amazing cast as well. A lot of people who've been around for a while and really haven't gotten their due either. Can we just talk about like Cheryl Lee Ralph, Lisa Ann Waltzer? I mean, we could just talk about Abbott Elementary on this thing, but we won't. Just want to echo all the stuff about Quinta because I agree. I'm so excited because she's just at the beginning. Okay, I'll stop gushing about Quinta Brunson.
No, I totally get it, because obviously these women have always been there. But I feel like a lot more younger women and women of color are like coming into these more common network TV shows and the bigger movies. And it's very nice to see. Atreo, did you have something to add?
Drawing a parallel, like Quinta doesn't really try to play on the tropes. She actually does stick to the classic mockumentary format. She doesn't really try to subvert it. And again, I love the statement she's making that you can present a feminine view without having to like change the format altogether. I remember how typecasting used to happen. If you see sets from around 2010, 12, 13, they're like very specific type of comedy that I don't like to say is allowed, but that's the kind of comedy that, I mean, the women who were doing that kind of comedy were the only ones making it to OTTs and like becoming popular. Like I remember Whitney Cummings starting out with comedy about experience in the bedroom and like sex jokes and a lot of crass humor. Not to, I mean, I don't want to look down upon it because it is hilarious, but also very specific. So, but now if you look at people like Taylor Tomlinson, she's out there riffing about mental health, like Bo Burnham used to. I like that they're actually taking up the space that they deserve to, instead of like always sticking to this format that we're allowed, which is also again Elizabeth Banks with Charlie's Angels. Like, she doesn't play on the spy movie format, she just plays on how the narrative is designed instead of the entire film genre itself. Another person I wanted to talk about is Catherine Reitman. I don't know how popular she is, but there's a series she helms called Working Moms. It's on Netflix and it's brilliant. I hate how underrated it is. It's running for 7 seasons, which is really rare for TV shows these days. And she's consistently been developing. Like you were talking about Issa Rae, the show keeps on tackling more and more difficult subjects. Like the mother-daughter relationship right now in the current season has been explored brilliantly because the daughter has come of age and she's going through experiences the mom is not opened with. The way they talk about boundaries, the way they talk about casual sexism. What I love about women helming is that you don't always just see forceful acts of sexism. There's casual sexism represented, and that's very essential because people don't understand that small ways are also violations. And if you're into workplace humor, it's a relatively wide show, but yeah, there's diversity there too. So give it a try if you haven't seen it. Working Moms is amazing.
Yeah, definitely. Bonnie?
I like to add on to Atreyo's like point of the topic of sexism because people practically think like, only boys can be troublemakers, but that is a sexist comment, especially in children's films. In The Ghost That Had to Go, when Ivy and Bean go to school, like they both get into trouble. It combats sexism and saying that boys and girls are like equals, like they should be viewed the same.
Oh, definitely. It's even in the children's movies. Andrew?
I get to talk about Beyonce. So I love that we, as MG was saying, we have this era where people who didn't always get a camera are exploring and they're doing things, and it's novel and it's cool and it's different lenses. And also, I just love the idea of there's universality in specificity. Wow, I cannot talk today. Words are hard, but there's universality in our experiences. And I just love like seeing something like Black is King and getting, on YouTube and watching people react to it and watching everyone who you may not even be African, right? Like I'm not African, right? I'm African American, of course, of African descent, but like just even seeing African people who recognize that it's not exactly, a perfect, right, like picture of them, but being happy at the idea, right? The representation, the well done research, the great visuals. It's just awesome to know that someone took the time to actually research things, put them together cohesively. And then here's the killer part. Even as an African American, she went out and grabbed African artists, singers, like historians, like filmmakers and directors, and said, can you help me? Can you make sure I'm doing a great job? Can you tell me what I'm missing? Can you fill in the gaps? And so I really want people to use that kind of mindset. Like, yes, write whatever you want. You don't have to be that group to write something, but reach out and grab people from that group to help make sure you're giving the best lens. And technically, you'll be giving them opportunities at the same time. So I just think that's awesome. And we should kind of keep that in mind when we talk about this kind of thing.
Obviously, we have pretty much every movie idea that's ever going to happen, we're putting it in different ways at this point. But I feel like a lot of women are coming into the male dominated genres, like we've said before, and women of color especially are like bringing their voices in, even though a lot of the time it's the same story-ish, like Cinderella and all that. It's got a different lens and it feels fresh, even though these women have been here forever. I guess the biggest thing I wanted to talk about was the depictions of women in movies, because there's a lot of positive to go around, but there is significantly more negative to go around. We got like Katniss Everdeen, we got Ripley from Aliens, strong women, but then we got like the manic pixie dream girl who's kind of just there to be a woman. And I kind of just wanted to go into that and how maybe that's changing. Maybe we're still a little in the past with that a bit. Like, what do we all think? Atreya?
I know we're gonna cover the positives, so I'm gonna go with the negative because I hated the movie and it made me sit through 3 hours. So yeah, I'm gonna complain about Blonde here. It's supposed to be a biopic about Marilyn Monroe. Firstly, I'm still unsure about why a man was writing, directing, everything. Like, I mean, I get that there are female crew members involved, but yeah, like, no, I really needed a female on the lens at least. If not directing, at least a cinematographer. I don't know, like, Why did that happen? And secondly, the story, not a single mention about her fierce personality. If you have seen the other one, My Week with Marilyn, yeah, if you have seen that film, it's very clearly depicted just how difficult she was to work with. Not because she, I mean, okay, fine, a little because of her personality, but also because she was not gonna take bullshit. Did not take what was handed. She went out and made her own destiny. And yeah, not a single mention of that. Instead, what we get is like her sitting around suggestively being abused and just ogled at by the camera for 3 entire hours. And the excessive amount of nudity in that film, it makes no sense. So yeah, like seriously, just a big problem.
Nudity is something we can talk all day about when we talk about women, but we're gonna try to keep that short. Andrew.
Okay, so Firestar, fire time. So I was just thinking about one of my favorite YouTubers, and she summed up, and this is why nuance is important, right? She summed up why you can love a movie like The Woman King and also be a little flummoxed by its presentation alone, if that makes sense. So let's put Woman King in an excellent box. Let's put It Being a Lone Depiction as a not so excellent thing. And so what we talk about is light-skinned mermaids, dark-skinned warriors, right? It's a nuance about no film is a film by itself. You don't make a film and it's just this film. It has to live in a universe and in context with all the other films in the film universe, right? And so sometimes I think about stuff like that where I'm like, I love The Woman King and I love The Little Mermaid, but it's this dichotomy where when it's a movie about warriors or slaves or some type of struggle, it's like, get those dark-skinned people, yeah. And then when it's a movie about let's be like, yeah, especially for Black women, when it's a movie about let's be softer, kinder, is the person supposed to be attractive? Now Halle Berry is Storm, even though Storm's supposed to be a half Kenyan woman and dark skin with unambiguous features. Yeah. The funny thing is when you talk about this, someone always makes a mistake, and I tell myself not to do this. You focus on Halle Berry and me saying Halle Berry, like I'm saying Halle Berry is a bad person. She doesn't deserve roles, when it's the opposite. I'm saying we need to talk about how Hollywood has this problem, right? Like this problem of when you think of people, because I don't think it's conscious. I don't think people go, I think, I'm going to only cast dark skinned people in this specific thing. I think that when you think of these people, when you think of these roles and characters, for some reason, you're going to dark-skinned people, and you need to like analyze why. And then my other thing is when you talk about like the strong woman trope, the strong Black woman trope is like that trope to 1,000. And there's a lot of research that talks about there's this idea that by putting this image out of the strong Black woman, right? And it's awesome because I do it too. Like, yes, you are strong, you are independent, but I've had Black women tell me, I know what you're trying to do and it's positive, but when people constantly tell us how strong we are, it's almost like it dehumanizes us and says we can take anything. We'll be okay. We don't need protection because we'll be okay, right? I heard similar rhetoric around like the goddess trope, right? Like, oh, Black women are goddesses. No, let's not dehumanize. I get what you're trying to do and I appreciate the sentiment, but let's pull it back to they're human, deserving of protection and admiration for their strength. And so the last thing I will say is one of the funniest things I've ever heard female writers critique male writers about is they're like, stop writing, she ran down the stairs and her boobs boobed boobily. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that is one of the worst. Like, that's the problem with a lot of male depiction of women. It's just like, she's going to be this big in 6-inch heels, in black latex, but she's gonna kick the Rock's ass. Like, come on, you know what I mean? That's just your like sexy fight girl fantasy that's not realistic, right? And so the last thing I'll say is you may not like the new Star Wars movies for whatever reasons. I personally, they were the first ones I saw, so I didn't hate them. But one thing I appreciated was I never felt like they unrealistically had Rey fight male characters and physically overpower them. They had her outmaneuver them, outsmart them, use her skills, right? Like, I think it's okay to have women who are badass, but I love seeing depictions where the woman is actually using her skills and outmaneuvering, doing things that make more realistic sense. I like those kind of depictions a little more than the Kung Fu Barbie kind of waifu stuff, right?
Oh yeah, it's a very thin line between actually positive and harmful.
What stands out to me, again, of course, Viola Davis played the role, but Annalise Keating is such an exception to that. She is so very layered on all grounds. Like, you will literally be afraid of talking to that woman when you're in the courtroom. But then she has these moments of pure vulnerability. She doesn't even feel like in control at that moment. The scenes where her abuse is being talked about, or where she's broken down in her mother's room, like Melissa was just mentioning, we don't need them all to be always punching, right? Like them needing help is also part of it, but also being bad is like, I mean, yeah, it's old, and even then it has one of the best female characters I've ever seen.
I agree. Annalise Keating is awesome.
Just piggybacking off what Andrew said about when women are in combat, there is a YouTube video that's like a how the scene was done thing with Elizabeth Banks talking about Charlie's Angels. And she talks about how she researched and talked to stunt people and choreographers about the different ways that women fight in combat. So that would feel like a more authentic fight scene. And that's something that like, I don't think that men doing action movies think about. I think they're just like, this would look cool and this is how we should do it. But women are like, in a scenario like this, if the man is like a foot taller and like several pounds heavier and like has a gun, how do we make that, how do we still have a believable win for her in this fight? We want to actually think that she can take this guy down. It's like using his own weight against him, using different things like making sure he's got something in his eyes so that he's blind. And it also makes for a much more visually impressive fight scene because there's more things going on rather than just like punch, punch, punch. There's like actual choreography happening. So I think that that's also, once we get women in the lens, whether it's behind the camera, writing the stories, actually like either directing or like shooting it themselves, like they actually think about these things. And so that it makes those scenes much more believable. So yeah.
It's not like women are like a mythical creature or anything where like we can just make stuff up. Like we have years of history. Obviously, women right now in the present, and yet they still like create this fantasy version instead of just like looking at their sister or like looking at their friend and being like, oh, that's not how they would do that. But yeah, Bonnie.
Of all the movie genres I've seen, like the most where there's like extremely sexist is the movie based on the video game series of the same name. There's an upcoming movie called the Super Mario Bros. Movie, and I want to like discuss it a little bit. One of the main flaws about the Super Mario Bros. Movie is the absence of female characters, like the absence of women. Princess Peach is the main and only female role in the upcoming Super Mario Bros. Movie, and she's voiced by a white woman named Anya Taylor-Joy. Her voice is easily distinguished, like when she plays Princess Peach, and all the other characters' voice, like they sound a lot deeper in the movies, but the main flaw is that the poor character choice in the Super Mario Bros. Series. There are a lot of fans who grew up with Super Mario, and they can easily recognize the other characters like Princess Daisy, Toadette, Birdo, Luma, Rosalina. Those are all like female characters in the series, and they're completely absent or make only cameo appearances. Like male dominance is still a major problem. And so while the Super Mario Bros. Movie may seem very exciting to viewers, because it's kind of odd to see like one woman stand out from all the other male characters in the series.
Yeah, there's still very much that damsel in distress happening. I mean, I don't remember when Mario was made, like 80s, 90s maybe. So, I mean, we kind of expect that from that era, but now that we're like getting to 2023, 2024, princesses exist, and there are like dainty women, they also exist, but like, I don't think we need every woman to be a damsel in distress, but we also don't need every woman to like completely not need anybody and punch people in the face. We can have some, but there's that line again, that very, very thin line.
Also, I'm a huge Nintendo fan, huge Mario fan, Pokemon, all of the big genres. I don't dislike Mario or say that there's anything wrong necessarily with its setup. I just think that you can't hide behind, well, this was our setup, because you see series like Zelda, right? Where even though Link is still the main hero, Zelda has evolved so much to the point where she is not a damsel in distress. She still needs Link, because right there, the three, her and Ganondorf and Link, right, are the three people who are integral to like saving this world. But the point is, she's evolved. She went from the same thing, I need Link to save me, to I need Link to help me save the world, right? Like I'm still part of it too. I'm still fighting. Like in a lot of the news stories, instead of being captured, she's like busy stopping something disastrous from happening. So she can't act. So she needs Link to go do things. And I think that's a way of not destroying your story setup where Link is a hero. Think about like in Spider-Man depictions, they were like Mary Jane has literally did the same thing. She's went from damsel in distress that Peter gawks over and just being pretty to, I'll hit the villain in the head with an umbrella if I have to. I will go investigate things. I will get out of the way so you don't have to come save me, because I'm not going to just go, there is a big monster coming. I'm going to stand here and look until you save me. Like, you know.
She figured it out. Like, that's how cool her representation has come. She figures out that Peter is Spider-Man. That's how, I mean, yeah. Anyway, continue.
I think that sometimes people think we're asking that all men be put to the side, be told they're not needed, when in reality, we're saying saving someone doesn't mean they have to be completely helpless. Like, maybe, yes, I've been kidnapped, but I also, when you show up, I figured out their secret plans, or I figured out a part you didn't know, or maybe it was part of our big plan where I let myself get captured. And yes, you have to ultimately come save me, but I'm figuring out information. But there are ways that you can make a character have agency that don't mean they have to be the central focus of a story, right? And I think that's where we go wrong, because a lot of people feel like if the person's not the main character, then giving them agency is somehow, you know, like going to take focus away when you don't have to do so. I love a sexy woman. My best friend is obsessed with what I call the ninja girls in suits, right? Like, he's obsessed with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I just think that it's that cartoonist that was on Twitter. They took the Marvel characters, right, the Avengers, and they put them in suits similar to Black Widow. So they had the Hulk and, you know, Thor and Iron Man all doing sexy poses. They had Spider-Man recreating poses that She-Hulk did, right? With his like chest poked out and his butt out and stuff. And people are like, if he looks ridiculous, then you need to think about why he looks ridiculous. And why don't you think She-Hulk, who's a lawyer and a superhero, would look ridiculous in a bikini with a volleyball that has nothing to do with the comic she's in? People will go, well, we can't have sexy women. Yeah, sure, but we're pointing out your inconsistency. If I show a guy in some tidy whities, right, flying around and strutting all over Manhattan while you save the world, you'll start to have a gay agenda. Like, you know what I mean? So it's like, we have to be consistent. So sexy is fine, but also let's make sure people want to be sexy. It's not being pushed on them. Let's make sure we're being consistent about it. So that's what I would say.
It's all about the lens. It really is. I feel like the male view has become the standard. So people think it's weird when it's the other way around. Like you said, the superheroes in the women's poses, and we're just now realizing it. Some people are. Yeah, Bonnie.
I like to add on to Andrew's comments. Only boys play video games is a common stereotype, and that's being portrayed in the Super Mario Bros. Movie. It's directed by a male director, and like the absence of the female character. There's a lot of stereotyping, like the woman who voices the yellow toe, like, oh, look at us, we're adorable. She only plays like a minor role in the series, and that's only like 3 lines, and like that's it. I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
Atreya?
You were talking about the damsel in distress trope, and my mind immediately went back to Shrek. Remember how they managed to do it with Fiona? She was exactly where every damsel in distress has been depicted, literally having to be rescued. But did she really have to be rescued? She kind of did it herself, to be honest. So again, a classic old movie, but it did get it right, and it's very, very weird to me that people are having to be taught this now. 22 years ago, guys.
I also was thinking of Shrek too, and I was thinking of Meg in Hercules, where she's like, I'm a damsel, I'm in distress, I got this. Like, literally that line. That's from like 1997 that movie came out. But yeah, Shrek was like 2001 or something, right? The fact that you're calling it old hurts me a little bit, because early 2000s should not be old, but I get it.
I mean, 2 decades is what I meant to say. Like,
I mean, it's okay, it's fine.
That's still painful.
I just have to like process that right now. But we want to talk about like probably one of the most iconic depictions of the subversion of the damsel in distress thing. Like, one of the earliest damsels in distress I can think of was Princess Leia, who we learned very quickly was not a damsel in distress. Like, they're like, Luke in particular and Han a little bit is thinking, we're gonna go save the princess, we're gonna go save the day. And they show up. Not only have we already seen her have a little bit of agency with the conversation she's had with Darth Vader and whoever, she initially has some sort of comment that like immediately calls him out and just like, aren't you a little short for a stormtrooper? Like, she's already got that attitude going on. And then if you watch as the rest of that whole scene develops, like, she grabs the blaster and is like the one who gets them out of there. Like, she didn't need to be rescued. Like, we learned very early on that that's not who she is. And even as you go on, if you see the kind of, you know, the problematic, the bikini in Return of the Jedi and all that kind of stuff, she still has full agency in that scene. Like, she kills Jabba the Hutt in that skimpy outfit. There's so many things I could say about Leia. Leia. And the fact that it's also like General Leia, like she is Princess Leia at the beginning, but like by the time we get to like the full like scope of what she's able to do, she is General Leia, and she is like the one who is like in charge of everything. And I mean, talking about women creatives, Carrie Fisher was a ghostwriter on a lot of really big things, and she has had a creative influence and like been able to kind of like figure out what she wants to do for her career for a long time. And my gosh, do we miss her. She set the standard in so many ways, and it was really just a pleasure to get to like consume anything that she created. And we definitely have to talk about Carrie Fisher on here, so I'm just mentioning that.
Josh, it's been a long time. Did you have anything you want to add?
I was kind of going to switch subjects. I've thought about Todd Phillips, who's known for these sort of frat comedies that go back like 20 to 25 years, and the lack of women characters, specifically underdeveloped women characters, is pretty staggering. You know, I'm thinking of movies like Old School, The Hangover, Due Date, even Joker that came out. The female character in those movies is usually like the wife at home, like the concerned girlfriend, the girl who makes demands and is like looking after the kids. The first Hangover, there's like a phone call scene at the beginning, like, where's my husband or where's my fiance? And that's like the only female presence in that entire movie. Well, I guess not counting, you know, Heather Graham's role toward the end. But yeah, that's kind of where my brain's been going as far as representation. So
I feel like there's a positive way to do like mothers and like sexual characters, because women can be anything and not all of it is negative. It's just all about how you show it, especially those older movies. I've been watching a lot of 80s movies, and I can probably count on one hand the amount of movies that don't have full bare chest to the screen. We're getting better, but there's still so many movies that is just like the 50s housewife, take care of my kids and be sexy. That's all I want from you. Andrew?
I like the direction Josh took us, because just going off of what I watch personally, one random show that I got hooked on as a kid, just from watching with older aunts and things, is the Golden Girls. And I was watching a documentary about the Golden Girls, and I thought one line that was interesting was, everybody talks about how groundbreaking it is, but no one wants to replicate it or redo it. I know how in Cleveland came, but I almost feel like that's an extension and not, you know, like it wasn't something outside of what was established with the Golden Girls kind of idea. No one followed the idea, right? Because like the funny thing is, these are awesome, funny. They each have their own thing, but Dorothy was mine. Like Dorothy and her sarcasm was mine. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people like Sophia, but I'm like, I like Dorothy. But the point was, I loved how often it made me feel like it was okay to be older. Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but literally I was like, they are fabulous. They're awesome. They're living good lives. They're having sex. Like, you know, they're doing fun things, and it's not a show about like they're being, even Sophia is realistically portrayed as, yes, I'm older, I'm the oldest, but I still have a life, right? So I have friends and I have things, and they still portray their ages and issues for it. And so I wish we had more depictions like that. And I also wish we had more depictions like Charm still. One thing that always got me about Charm was, yes, there are powers, demons, people exploding, people being thrown with telekinesis. But the funny thing would be the sisters and their interactions with one another. And even their love stories were not the focus. It was literally always their lives and interacting together. And I liked how there's a sister that's like, I hate this. I want to just be normal. I just want to have a family. There's another one's like, this is keeping me from a family. And there's another one that's like, well, the sooner we kick all their asses, we can go back to being normal, right? Like, I like just their interaction and the funny lines between them. And really, that's what I think the new Charm was missing, like that sisterly kind of bond dynamic, whatever, was too focused on the powers. I would just say that I would like to see more portrayals where women has, I forget the word, is it Bechdel test?
Bechdel test.
I'd like to see more films like that where it's not like, do you have a man or don't you? Like, you know what I mean? I saw a meme that was so annoying. It was like 4 women sitting around eating, and it was like, when all our men are being good and we don't have no tea to spill about how bad our men are, and everybody's just quiet eating their food. I'm like, you have lives, like you can talk about other things going on besides
that meme does not pass the Bechdel test. I can tell you
exactly. So like, I just wish we had more films that did that where women could be in them, and even men could be in a movie too. And it's not about who's with who and what in proximity to a man. So that's what I would say.
We haven't even really gotten into like subsections of women, because like you said, pretty much in media still today, as soon as a woman, like the day she turns 50, oh, she's a scary hag, oh, she has no life, like, oh, she's in a forest, like they're just regular people. Can they just have a regular story? MG?
What Andrew was saying about Golden Girls and about Hot in Cleveland, which was good, but like no one watched it. You're right. I feel like no one's really tried to remake the Golden Girls thing, but I feel like there is a new genre of movies that is like old women as best friends and the camaraderie of that and all the antics that they get up to. And I think that, you know, like Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin have kind of like capitalized on that. I mean, they also have Grace and Frankie, which is its own kind of thing on Netflix. There's like Palms, there's this new 80 for Brady thing, and all of those movies are just so fun. Book Club got a sequel. There is stuff happening in the movie realm, which is another reason that like we talked about this on a couple of the other panels, but like diversifying the content that you consume, like not just doing movies, not just doing this. Like sometimes if you can't find it on TV, maybe it's in movies. If it's not in movies, maybe it's in theater, and kind of figuring out like all the different places that art exists and that people are creating stories, kind of being more open to that. Sometimes you can find more. It doesn't mean we don't need more in each of the other platforms. I feel like maybe movies are the place to kind of find what Andrew's talking about right now. Yeah.
I forgot right now they're doing a lot of stuff like that. And like, I know that it's generally targeted towards women that age, but I'm 25 and I've had friends who like watch Grace and Frankie, and it's like the best show. Like, I think people just have a fear of crossing the line, and they have a fear that it's going to be old and boring, and like, or a certain movie or show is going to be like sexual or, you know, whatever, and they just don't want to cross that line. There is a tiny subgroup, not tiny, but I wanted to kind of get into, I guess it's somewhat negative because of the world, but I did want to briefly talk about trans women because I feel like that is a greatly underused like subsection of women, and we're getting a little better, but we still have like straight cis people playing trans people, which is like acting, but it's like there's like we have actresses, like just use them. Atreya?
Yeah, so I want to get off on a positive note here because I'm a huge fan of Queer Joy. I mean, if you're queer, you obviously are. So anything's possible. It released last year and it was helmed by trans creatives. Eva Rain plays Kelsa, the main character in the film, and she herself is trans. The film is entirely joyous. Okay, there's tragedy because reality happens, but that's not the focus of the story. And there's this trans woman being herself, enjoying life as herself, and it's extremely life affirming to watch. The sad part, honestly, is that that is the only example I have. Like, wow. It's a good thing that it's just it's recent, so maybe, but like, yeah, not many examples out there.
Josh?
This might be kind of controversial since it's essentially been canceled, but Transparent, I thought was just a really good show. It is unfortunately an example of a cis male playing a trans character, but I believe it was the last season. There was a trans female character who was a love interest of one of the sons of. I also want to bring up Euphoria. Jules, I believe, is trans female. I think that's an interesting example because it wasn't something that was emphasized in the show, and I don't think it was emphasized in the press and the promotion. I thought it was a pretty good example of a character just being a character without drawing attention to that aspect of her identity. So to try to be positive about the portrayal of trans women going on today. So
Atreya?
I agree with you, Josh. I love the fact that she gets to exist as herself without it focusing on her identity. But honestly, it feels less like not focusing on it and more like literally not acknowledging it, because a lack of conversation because they're entitled to be who they are without having to talk about it all the time is good, but a lack of conversation because you're afraid to bring it up is much worse. And I feel like watching the show, the way it talks about a lot of issues, I just feel like the lack of conversation about it is more about Sam Levinson wanting to avoid the topic altogether. The only time I've seen her conversing is with her therapist in that special episode. I'll give you that makes sense that she will talk there, of course. But in general, all these characters are talking a lot about their personal issues, and Jules herself has a lot of personal conversations with the characters. But yeah, that's never brought up, and it doesn't always feel like positive representation. It does feel like more like, you know what, I don't want to, this feels icky, so let me just avoid it. So yeah.
Andrew?
I could say something positive about the new Charmed, actually. That's cool. It came full circle. I think they did what Josh was describing well. They had a trans character that turned out to be like the sister's, like a cousin, and it had a bit of the tragedy aspect that's pretty unfortunate, relatable, right? Being kicked out and make your own way, but deciding to be your own person. But they didn't focus on that, and they also did not talk about the trans identity. So it came up naturally in conversation, but they weren't like, like, let's have a whole dissection of your body and identity right now. Like, literally, it just came up naturally. They never had any issue around accepting the idea. And it was established that everyone knew this from back then. And the actual father that kicked this character out is the ostracized part of the family, not this character, right? And then also, I just want to point out First Day. It's an Australian show about an actual trans actress playing a trans like high schooler, I think, and the experiences around that. And I've heard criticism that it focuses a lot on the whole like trans experience, identity, tragedy thing, but at the same time, it tries to go beyond that and just say, this is me going to school, and it shows positive representation of like interacting with different friends and stuff like that. So wanted to throw that out there that I heard that was a good show, and it's on my list of things to watch. Go Australia.
One of the things that's interesting about this roundtable is that it's Women's History Month. And in some ways, the fact that women get their own History Month, it still feels like why are women a diverse part of the population? But there's also this sort of growing, there is something about the space that's been created to have these conversations about women. It's also opening up these other conversations that we could be having. And the more that we're open to that, the more that we allow for us to not feel like one down because other people need to talk about what they're talking about and like make space for that. It's wonderful. I love that. Like, we're talking about trans women, right? And I think that it's really important to have that as a conversation. I also think that it's important to talk about non-binary people and trans people who were assigned female at birth, because I think that there is something about that experience that it has its own topic to talk about, and within Women's History Month is an interesting thing to kind of get into, but like, we don't have time to do that on this particular thing. But I think that it's really important to be really expansive in the way that we talk about all of this. So I'm glad that you brought up trans women, because I think it's a big topic. There's a lot of positives and a lot of negatives on this topic, and we've kind of covered some of it. In particular, I've noticed that a lot of the things we're talking about, not movies, but TV, that's really tackling it. And I think that when you're doing it on TV, you also have more time to explore a longer story arc and really get into some of the layers of what that experience is like. I think a lot of the reason that initially it was cis people playing these characters is because these were new stories that people weren't ready to tell, and they weren't really sure how to tell. They knew they were important. They knew they wanted to tell them, but they didn't have the resources to know there's other people out there who could be playing these, because those people don't have enough widespread credit. People don't know about them because they don't get the chances, because we're systemically like cis het white male run, and if you don't fit into that, you have to make a pathway for your career. And that's also why it's important for the people who have made that pathway to reach out a hand and pull more people through. And we've been talking a little bit about that on this, but I think that going back to what we're talking about, television, I think that it's really cool because more and more I keep seeing trans people playing trans characters and trans and non-binary storylines developing and really giving visibility to what that experience is like through the lens of someone who actually has been through that. And I really love it that we've got these storylines that are sort of these coming out storylines, and how important that is to see that on screen. But because we've now sort of laid the groundwork for that, we also have the ability to have characters who just exist as they are in their trans identity, in their non-binary identity, and have that be just a normalized thing. Normalized is kind of a word, but and I think one of the best examples I have of that is Heartstopper. And I swear we're going to do something about Heartstopper for Pride, because I think that Heartstopper does so many wonderful things with queer representation. But in particular, Elle, the character in Heartstopper, is a trans woman, but that is not her storyline. It's not about the fact that she's trans. It's just about the fact that she's the new kid in school. It happens to be an all-girls school. She came from an all-boys school. They have maybe like 2 or 3 lines from other characters about the fact that people were transphobic at their old school, and that's why Elle had to go to the new school. And then it's just about Elle making friends and Elle having a crush on a guy, and like that's just what her storyline is. And I think that is so refreshing and so important to have that visibility on screen. And it is something, and Bonnie will love this, that's targeted toward kids and families. It's a very wholesome show, and we need more wholesome queer content. And that's not what this is about. That's more about pride. But that, I just think, is one of the really wonderful things that I've seen develop over just the past couple of years, is to see these storylines where trans people can just exist as they are, and it doesn't have to be about the fact that they're trans. They have storylines outside of what that experience is like. Not that, and again, Andrew has said this before, we need the stories of trauma. We need the stories about the struggle and how hard that is. But we also need these stories that are not just like, it's not just trans joy, it's just like being a person, and you're a person too. You're outside of that identity. There's other things going on. So that's my piece.
Amazing. I mean, hopefully we'll have like an entire video on Pride Month. I really would like to do that. But that also goes into the little pretty bow that I wanted to put on all of this, although it's not so pretty. The future of women in media. And I'm going to say my explosive statement. I want Women's History Month to stop existing. And currently, that is an explosive statement, but I don't want it to stop existing now. I just hope that maybe like 3 generations down, we'll finally be at a point where we don't need a whole month for more than half the population. And we can just, I hate to say the normal statement, but every month be Women's Month. I think we're getting there. I think the future of women in media is looking bright, but we still have a long way to go. And I'm hoping that the new generation gets into the workforce and like starts changing this. Hopefully we can do many more women-centric videos, but unfortunately have to stop this roundtable. So I will end it with saying, go out there, try to consume more media, support older women, support women of color, support LGBTQ women, and everyone go see Cocaine Bear. Just get out there, and I promise you, you're missing like billions of movies. Goodbye, everyone.